Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bob Lorem, Chief Marketing Officer with Vortex MSP. Just wanted to personally welcome you to today's webinar entitled Microsoft 365 Defender, How to Protect Your Organization and Mitigate Risk. So again, thank you for joining today. We'll get a couple of notes out of the way here before we jump in and introduce the speaker. But again, Microsoft Defender for Business, a pretty popular topic. We had quite a few people RSVP for this event, so hopefully you'll find this information by our speaker to be really valuable because it's important to protect your organization and, quite honestly, your personal information as well. As we progress through the webinar today, what we'd like to do is have our speaker present the content first, and he's going to be doing a live demo as well toward the end. So if you could hold all your questions or enter them into the chat box as we progress, we will address them at the end of the show. Any questions that he's not able to answer live, we'd be more than happy to follow up with you via email or phone later this week. So tomorrow you will receive what we call our post-webinar landing page where you can access the recording of the webinar so you can share with your friends, family, cousins, whatever you want to share it with, along with a copy of the slide deck and also some other information, a survey where you can give us feedback on how we did, as well as potentially recommend some other topics that you might be interested in. So that'll be coming out via our email tomorrow. So let me introduce today's speaker. Matt Wheeler is Vortex CTO and co-founder of the company about 4 years ago, and he's pretty much a Microsoft maestro on everything that he works on. He's licensed in everything, including his driver's license. So he's well skilled and versed in everything everything Microsoft. So you're in really good hands. This is the second of our quarterly webinar educational series with Matt. So you'll probably see Matt every once a quarter. We may even increase the frequency of these as we move forward because we're getting a lot of requests and feedback for more educational content. So with that, I'd like to introduce Matt. Matt, have some fun and show us your magic.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Bob, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm actually very excited about today's agenda because Microsoft 365 Defender just so happens to be one of my favorite pieces of, the Microsoft 365 suite, and something that I think sets this apart as like the best business platform out there. So today's agenda, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you guys to the Microsoft 365 Defender suite. Defender is made up of 4 different portions, so to speak. There are other defenders like Azure Defender, which I'm not going to talk on today. But just so you know, it is a common word in the Microsoft 365 sphere. So today we're going to talk about Microsoft 365 Defender for Endpoint. I'm going to do a deep dive into Defender for Endpoint and show you guys some of the features that you get with Defender for Endpoint, like the really granular level of visibility that you'll have into your devices. All right, I'm going to speak about Defender for Office 365, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Cloud Apps. All of these work together in the Defender suite. All right, and so what you're going to see is that the Defender suite is a pre- and post-breach enterprise defense suite. So what that means is it can coordinate the detection, prevention, investigation, and a response across endpoints, identities, email, and applications. So we're not just talking about, seeing that your computer has a vulnerability on it. We're talking, IP recognition, DNS protection, pulling malware out of emails after one malware is discovered throughout the organization. I mean, the capabilities that this suite provides you are just really high security and something that we think is really great. I would also like to mention it's something that we implement by default for all of our Vortex customers. So if you are managed by Vortex, you are using Microsoft 365 Defender. One of the best things about this is the automatic action to prevent or stop the attack, and then the self-healing of affected mailboxes, endpoints, and user identities. What this means is that if the system were to notice a intrusion or some sort of malicious event, it can disconnect the computer, the device, wherever the connection is coming from, it can automatically disconnect that connection and block access to the organization's data. So you're going to see here that there's like ransomware prevention and all these different types of things that Defender gives you access to and allows you to automatically detect and automatically remediate, sometimes without any human intervention. So it's very cool tools. All right. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about Defender for Endpoint. Defender for Endpoint is a unified endpoint platform. Basically, what that means is it's an application or a service that can run not only on your Windows devices, but it also exists on the Mac OS and the iOS and Android as well. So it's not just for Windows. This is a defender against any device, also known as device agnostic. Some of the features are only going to work on Windows 10, which I'm going to, Windows 10 and 11, which I'm going to explain here in a second. But it is not only Windows devices that can be protected. All right, so this Defender for Endpoint suite includes endpoint behavioral sensors. These sensors are embedded into Windows 10 and 11, and they collect and process behavioral signals from the operating system. This sends the sensor data to our private, isolated Defender admin portal, and it gives us that really granular view into the device. I think this is really cool. What it does is it watches your behavior, like how do you use your computer, right? If on a typical day I create a couple files and delete a couple files, it's sensing my behavior. And then let's say one day I suddenly delete 400 files and I rename 100 files. It's going to notice that as a really weird behavior of mine, and it's going to flag that for an administrator, and it could also then begin remediation, cutting me off from accessing that data, right? What it looks for is things like ransomware. When it hits your computer, what it does is it rewrites all of the files, right? So you see this like increase in editing of files, basically every file that it can get to on your computer. So if you're normally editing, I don't know, 10, 20 files a day, and all of a sudden you edit 1,000, it's really cool that your computer can now recognize that that behavior is very abnormal and just stop it right there. Stop the spread of the ransomware, disconnect your computer from the organization's data. Then whatever data was in the cloud that was encrypted, you can actually just roll that back prior to encryption. So we like to consider this, Microsoft 365 with the Defender for Endpoint and using SharePoint and OneDrive. This solution is pretty much ransomware proof. So the days of paying those ransoms will be behind you. All right. The cloud security analytics, it allows us to leverage big data, device learning, and unique optics across the Windows ecosystem. So that's behavior again in Office 365, behavior in the Edge web browser. You can watch behavior of your on-premises endpoints as well. So if you guys have hybrid environments, you can integrate your on-premises environment and watch for signals from there as well. And then the threat intelligence. So by utilizing this platform, you're no longer worrying about, hey, what articles am I reading that give me a heads up? Now you've got the entire powerhouse of Microsoft's SOC behind us. So you are receiving alerts as they happen. I mean, I can't imagine any company pours more money into cybersecurity and looking out for these threats than Microsoft. I also love to point out that Microsoft spends more money than the US government in cybersecurity. So we are very confident that the SOC services is just a huge advantage of the Defender for Endpoint suite. All right. Talking about Defender for Office 365. So this is more focused now on the collaboration protection and email protection. So you'll see that there are a few different portions of it: anti-malware, anti-phishing, anti-spam. All of this is just adding to the security. So just a quick intro to those. Anti-malware is a multi-layered malware protection that's designed to catch all known malware in Windows, Linux, and Mac that travels into and out of the organization. So um, if you receive malware, you want it stripped, from the email. You don't necessarily need that to alert the administrator unless that malware gets through, right? If the malware gets through, you definitely want your administrator to know. That's when you can take a look at the Defender admin portal, find that malware, and actually pull it from the computer after the fact. Also, that's part of the auto remediation. So you may not necessarily even have to do the work for that to happen. All right. Safe links is um, a URL protection service. So what that does is it will rewrite any link that is shared with you either from Outlook, from Teams, or anything inside of the Office 365 suite. So if there's a link inside of a Word document or a PowerPoint that was sent to you, it will rewrite that link. Basically what it does is it verifies that it is a safe link when you go to access it. If the system discovers that the link is actually malicious, it'll pop up a big red screen that says, hey, we don't want you to access this link, and here's why. Sometimes you have the option to continue through. It depends on how your administrator um, configures that, but we pretty much prefer not to allow users to click through. There's a reason that system thinks it's fraudulent, and so we always want our clients to reach out and say, hey, administrator, this is what we've got going on, can you guys take a look into it for us? Next is safe attachments. I mean, obviously very similar to the safe links. Basically what it's doing is it is taking a look at that attachment. It's launching that attachment in a sandboxed environment to make sure that there is no malicious code that runs when you access the attachment. If it verifies that that's the case, then it delivers it to your mailbox. If it discovers that there is malicious code, it's going to strip that attachment from the email, and it can either send that email to your quarantine or you can send it to your inbox. Again, it is the administrator configuring it. Our recommendation is send it to quarantine, right? There's no reason why it needs to hit the inbox. If a malicious attachment was stripped, send it straight to quarantine and keep your users safe. So now we talk about protection with 0-hour auto purge. So this was one of the auto remediations I was talking about. Whoops, looks like it switched the page on me. So the 0-hour auto purge is one of the automatic remediations that I was talking about. Basically, this will protect your mailbox, and it retroactively detects and neutralizes malicious phishing, spam, or malware messages that have already been delivered to Exchange Online mailboxes. This ZAP, or the 0-hour auto purge, constantly monitors spam and malware signatures that are updated from Microsoft. If it finds these messages, it could automatically remove it from end users' mailboxes in the organization. So once again, we're taking advantage of Microsoft's massive spend on cybersecurity, and the time that they spend hunting down all of these threats. We know right away when an organization is impacted by these threats because it's all happening automatically, and we're relying on Microsoft for that. All right. Next is Defender for Identity. Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution that uses your Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. So I mentioned earlier that some of these features can also be used in a hybrid environment. And so Defender for Identity is one of those that does work in a hybrid environment. What it does is it monitors and analyzes user activities across the network, such as permissions, group membership, and it creates a behavioral baseline for each user. It then uses this behavioral baseline to help it identify anomalies with using adaptive built-in intelligence, giving you insights into suspicious activities and events, and revealing the advanced threats, compromised users, and insider threats facing your organization. So the insider threat I find very interesting because it's one of those things that I think a lot of organizations have struggled with. How do you know if a user downloads 500 documents from your organization's file server and deletes them? Right now, in a file server system, you would probably have to have some sort of third party application monitoring for this. Well, not anymore. Now you can use Defender for Identity or the Defender suite, and you can keep an eye out for those malicious activities that you wouldn't have discovered before. And so now if a user, say, tries to download and delete 500 files, it's actually going to protect those files and alert and notify an administrator that this has taken place. So, I mean, the technology there is just really amazing. All right. Again, it's going to bring all of that information back to the Defender admin portal where you're going to be able to look at what's going on, investigate, and kind of go from there. I'm going to show you guys the admin portal here in a little bit. It's very cool. I just want to make sure I touched on everything I wanted to talk about. Very good. All right, so next is Defender for Cloud Apps. This is a cloud access security broker. So what is that? A cloud access security broker supports various deployment modes, including log collection, API connectors, reverse proxy, all very technical. What does it mean? So something that is very difficult for organizations to keep track of is what's called shadow IT. A lot of times the IT department or the organization itself doesn't know that a user has, say, created their own Gmail account, copied the organization data into their Gmail account in order to more easily, quote unquote, share it with external users. Right? How do you catch that? Another example is an organization has no idea that their marketing department has suddenly spun up another third party, emailing platform to send out mass emails and stuff like that. You have to know about it because it impacts your ability to even send email, right? If the email records don't match, your domain could be marked as, spam or deny listed. So it's really important to keep an eye out for those things. So what this broker does is you can install it on things like the firewall, and you can keep an eye on data that's passing through your network, and you can find these shadow IT applications that have been spun up. So it gives you visibility into detecting all cloud services that your organization is using. It'll assign a risk ranking to that cloud service, and then it'll identify all the users that are accessing this cloud service. So you want to talk about, maintaining control over your organization's data. This is definitely one of the best tools for that. Defender for Cloud Apps is also massively helpful for compliance, right? You have to know where your data is and where it lives, who's accessing it, and the type of data being stored there. And that's always been one of those big challenges. So, again, Defender for Cloud Apps and that cloud access security broker is very important. All right, so now we're going to take the deep dive into Office 3 M365 Defender for Endpoint. So there are 6 pieces that make up the Defender for Endpoint. First is the core Defender vulnerability management. What that means is you can use a modern risk-based approach to the discovery, assessment, prioritization, and remediation of endpoint vulnerabilities and configurations. I'm going to show you this portal here in a little bit. That's going to give you more information about what that means. But basically, it's one pane of glass that you can go to see the health of your devices across the organization, not just Windows devices again, but devices. So Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, Android, right? Any device that can access your organization's data. And we are very pro using multiple devices to access the data. We live in a world now where you don't necessarily sit at the desk anymore at your office. You're on the move. You're I don't know, taking public transit. You're in an airplane. So it's not always the case that you have your laptop with you. So we believe that anyone should be able to use their devices and have their device secured and have a secure connection and access to the data that lives in Office 365. Another feature of Defender for Endpoint, and I had mentioned this about the malware, or I'm sorry, the ransomware protection, but it's called attack surface reduction. So the attack surface is like all of the different ways that somebody could try to infiltrate your organization. So, getting at your computer, getting you to click on a malicious link, doing some engineering or some phishing to try to get somebody to give you access to something. So we want to reduce that attack surface as much as possible. So um, that includes things like network protection, web protection, regulating access to malicious IP addresses, domains, and URLs. So if you are actively managing or monitoring those pieces, right, like DNS, then you can reduce the possible places that an attack could be successful on your network. So again, it's just all of these different pieces that used to be, oh, you have an antivirus for this, and you have detection and remediation, a different tool for that, and you had a third-party spam filter. All of these things are now living in one pane of glass. And what that also means is when I spin up an account in Office 365 and I add them to my groups in Office 365, they're automatically protected by all of this. So, it's just another big advantage of keeping everything in one platform is the onboarding and offboarding of any user or device becomes much, much easier. So we're going to talk about the next generation protection. This one is kind of fun because in reality, like almost all the antivirus programs out there do very well these days. So there was a test done by this organization, nonprofit, actually based out of Australia, called avtest.org, where they tested 9 different antivirus programs. And I think it was like a 36-point test, and it turned out like 7 of the 10 antivirus softwares got a perfect score. So I think the story there is you really should have antivirus. These days, it doesn't really matter which one is your favorite because they all do pretty well. But obviously, our favorite is Defender for Endpoint, or what's just Windows Defender. And the reason is because, again, it's integrated into the platform. The people that built Windows built this antivirus platform. It's already on the computer. It's free with the licensing that you already have. So why not take advantage of it and be able to see all of the information that I'm about to show you in one pane of glass. So again, it's just very easy. I go to one place to see, the security of my entire network. The endpoint detection and response capabilities are put in place to detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats that have made it past the first 2 security pillars being the vulnerability management and the surface reduction. So advanced hunting provides a query-based threat hunting tool that lets you proactively find breaches and create custom detections. So if you know of something that can be exploited in your network, you can search for that exploit, and then you can remediate it. You can also use Power Automate to automatically detect and remediate issues as well. So there is some level of configuring that has to take place to get that automated detection and remediation to take place. But it's really such a great thing. Oh, actually, that brings me on to my next point of automated investigation and remediation. So in conjunction with being able to quickly respond to advanced threats, Defender for Endpoint offers automatic investigation and remediation capabilities that, again, help reduce the volume of alerts in minutes and at scale. That just means it's going to reduce the noise when, say a computer updates, like your Adobe software needs to be updated. There's a known exploit for that. The computer, say the user updates Adobe on by themselves because they opened the application and asked them if they wanted to update. They hit yes, and so now it's going to notice that that was completed and close that investigation. So that type of automation is nice. Again, like I mentioned, you can take it a step further and use Power Automate to further remediate any detections or issues on the computer. And the last is having the access of Microsoft threat experts. So Defender for Endpoints managed threat hunting service provides proactive hunting, prioritization, and additional context and insights that further empower security operations centers to identify and respond to threats quickly and accurately. So again, you're just taking advantage of Microsoft's massive SOC and applying it to your organization. So you're allowing them to do all of that all of the hunting and investigating, and then telling us, hey, this is malicious, and here are the computers that we found it on in your environment. Go ahead and get that removed. All right, so this is the very exciting part, is our live demo. Basically, what I'm going to do is share my screen here, and I'm going to walk you through what the Defender portal looks like. I'm going to show you guys that deep granular level view that we have of our devices. And then I'm going to show you guys how you can then automate those the remediation of those issues through Defender for Endpoint. All right. So here on my screen is the Defender admin portal. This is a dev environment that we have so that we can show off things like Defender for Endpoint. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll see that we have not just Endpoint, but the email, which is Defender for Office 365, cloud apps, and then I believe we have identity in here as well. All
Hey,
right.
Matt.
Yes.
Matt, this is Bob. Sorry to interrupt, but because you're on a
Hey,
roll
Bob.
here. But we're not seeing the screen with the demo yet. You're still there. We go. Now we're seeing something else. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. That would have been a very funny demo if you guys weren't able to see the screen. So
True.
here is actually the Defender portal that you can see on the screen. Over here on the left, we have the Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, cloud apps, and then I believe identity is held in the Azure AD portal. We're going to focus on the Defender for Endpoint again, and I want to show you guys the dashboard, which is going to show us our organization exposure score. So it looks at all of our devices, all of the applications we use, networks, accounts, and it's going to give us a score of how vulnerable it thinks our organization is. And we want that score to be pretty low. So in our dev environment, we do have a low exposure score. The lower, the better. Here are some recommendations that Microsoft is making to further lower our exposure score. And so this is that level of granularity I was telling you guys about that I think is just absolutely amazing. And this is one that I think is a perfect example. So we have 22 weaknesses that have to do with Zoom meetings. And I can see in my network that out of the 5 computers that have Zoom installed, 3 of them are experiencing a vulnerability. And how do I fix that vulnerability? By updating Zoom meetings. All right. So I can click on Zoom meetings, the remediation, it wants me to update meetings. So it's telling me exactly what I need to do. It's showing me the associated CVEs so I can see where they got this from. Right. And I can take a look at that and say, oh, it's taking advantage of something that can now be exploited. So I can go back and I can see what devices actually have this application installed on them. So I can either reach out to the end user and say, hey, go ahead and update this. Or what I would do as the administrator is I would say, all right, these 3 computers need Zoom updated. So what I would then do is I would go into the endpoint management system, which is called Microsoft Intune. I would create a new application in my organization. I'll go to Windows specifically, and I would say, hey, I need to update Zoom. So I'm going to go to the Zoom website. I'm going to download the MSI, which is an installer package. And then I'm going to upload that installer package. You can see here, I'll just call it Zoom. I don't need to know specifically that it's 32-bit. Zoom is the publisher. You can add command line arguments. So for those of you that are administrators, if any of you on here are, command line arguments allow you to quietly install an application, possibly using -Q. You can make it silent. The command line arguments, typically you would find that information provided from whoever's providing you with that installer. So for example, Zoom on their website might tell us, hey, if you want to mass install this, this is what you should do. Otherwise, we're going to leave it the way it is. We'll hit next. And then this is where we want to assign it to the computers. And so right now you see here that we can add a group, and we can add a group of devices because there were only 5 devices with Zoom installed. And if our users don't necessarily need Zoom, then I feel there's no reason to install it on all the computers. So what I would want to do is I would want to create a new group. So I'm actually going to leave this page. I would create a new group. I would assign members. We'll call this Zoom update Windows. All right. And then when I selected, I should be able to type in the computer name. There it is. And so now I've added this computer to the group, which is called Zoom update. I'll go back to my applications. This time when I go to create the Zoom app, I will be able to assign it to that computer. And now I know that when that computer checks back in, Zoom is going to update. I never had to bother the user. I never had to reach out to them. I can just push this update to their computer, and then I will know that this issue has been resolved. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that here. Okay. So what's happening now is it's uploading the application. I can see here that the app is 5.15.2, which I believe is the latest version. It's going to take a few minutes, sometimes up to an hour or so for it to push to the computer. It also depends on if the computer is on, connected to the internet. But when it does check back in, it's going to call out to Intune, say, hey, has anything changed policy-wise? And Intune's going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and update this application. After a few hours, the application is updated. I can come back to this site and see that there is no longer those vulnerabilities in my network. And that's going to increase my decrease my exposure score. Now you're going to see in here that there are some that are like enable local security authority protection. And you're like, what the heck is that? I don't even know what this is and how I would handle that. Well, that's okay, because what Microsoft has provided for us are baseline securities that we can enable in our network to protect ourselves from things like this. So to get there, we would go to Intune. We would go to Endpoint Security and Security Baselines. They actually just recently added a new security baseline for the enterprise apps. So we'll take a look at that and create a profile here. So now you're going to see all of the configuration settings that you have access to. Some of them might be important to you. Some of them might not be. Disallowing users to create templates. That's not something, it looks like something that is enabled by default. You can go through the security settings and turn things on and off. So for example, in the endpoint baseline settings that we have created for Vortex, in our dev environment here, we should see two different configurations. A sales configuration, because our sales users don't necessarily need to use PowerShell. And so scripting doesn't necessarily need to be enabled for them. But on the tech side, our users obviously need to use PowerShell. And so we have to be able to create and use scripts directly on our computer. So what we had to do was create two different baselines and apply those to the computers. You can see in that baseline, it's things like enabling BitLocker to make sure that your hard drive is encrypted, enabling all of the attack surface reduction rules so that you know that you're even more secure. So these are going to be the things that should show up here and show that now, hey, like for example, basic authentication is probably allowed on our tech devices, but not our sales devices. And so you can see that's why there's only 9 exposed devices instead of 12. So what we like to do is come in here, take a look, figure out what our biggest vulnerabilities are, and then kind of work down from there. All right. So that was really what I wanted to show you guys on this platform. Again, there's just so much more that you can deep dive into. So, you know, outside of the endpoints, there is evaluation and tutorials. This actually gives you simulations where you can simulate malware being, making its way into your network. What would that attack look like? And then what would I do to defend against that attack? So you can see here that the capabilities are just really incredible. It is a lot though. So this is why a lot of companies reach out to us to help them with it. All right. I'll just show you guys a couple other things. Policies and rules. This is where you would go to configure your threat policies for anti-malware, anti-spam, anti-phishing, safe links. This is where you can create your email rules to prove you are who you are. And all of this is a part of the Defender suite. So with the Defender for Office 365, you gain access to these things. And it really helps you not just secure your network, but know, you know, I know that our email will be delivered to our recipients and not go into malware because I know that, for example, we have DKIM enabled and we have DMARC enabled, and all of this can be seen from the Defender portal. All right, so real quick, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint presentation. And this leaves us with our key takeaways. All right, so I just want you guys to remember that the Defender Suite is a comprehensive cybersecurity solution by Microsoft to protect against threats and secure your digital environment. It's not just a pre infiltration system, it is also a post infiltration system. So it's one pane of glass for everything to do with cybersecurity. You have 4 different pieces of that, which are the Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Cloud Apps. All of these working together, we can pretty much guarantee that you're going to, remain secure. There's not going to be any ransomware that's going to bring you down or anything like that. The Defender for Endpoint is a unified endpoint platform, which includes the behavioral sensors, the cloud security analytics, and the threat intelligence. All right. So everyone, this is really what I came here to talk about today. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. I do have time here for some questions. So Bob, if you're there, have we had any questions?
I got a couple here, but it's again really nice job, Matt. I mean, there's a ton of stuff to cover across the four modules and then some. So you did a nice job of summarizing the key points, highlighting what those are the most important. And it's obvious that you're passionate about this, especially when you kicked into the demo. We can see that you live and breathe this stuff every day because it's near and dear to not only Vortex for your own company, but for also your clients. So nice job. One of the quick questions. So as I ask a couple of these questions to the folks here and to Matt, feel free to use the chat box. Don't be shy. We'll be glad. We won't call out your name if you have a question. So just feel free to engage. But got a couple things here. Matt, the first one's from me personally. You mentioned that the MS 365 Defender for Business Suite was pretty much near and dear to your heart. As I
Hmm.
mentioned, you covered a lot of modules in a short amount of time. Pending audience feedback via today and/or the survey that goes out tomorrow, would you be willing to maybe conduct another webinar at some point in time on any of the four modules or something similar in the future?
Uh, for sure. You know me, I love to talk shop. So if anybody's interested, I'm always happy to teach about any of this. You know, again, this was really not a super deep dive. It was really right there on the surface. So yes, ultimately I would be happy to do that.
Good deal. I got a quick question here. There's two or three that I've got. The first one is, all right, so is there a rough implementation and training time to install MS Defender for Business? In other words, I'm sure it's based on the number of users and the size of the organization, but roughly in your experience at Vortex, how long does it take to set up a company to get going with this suite?
Yeah, so it really depends on where your company is at with their technology. So, in order to really take advantage of the Defender suite, you would need to utilize things like Microsoft Intune. If your organization is already using Intune, then enabling Defender for Endpoint is as simple as turning on a connector and setting up a sensor installation rule. And so the beauty of it is Microsoft pretty much gives you that, and all you've got to do is hit turn on. But that will only work if your computer is joined to Microsoft Intune and you're taking advantage of that in Azure AD. If you're not, then it does depend on the size of your organization because we would want to get your devices into Intune, and then we would be able to take advantage of the Defender for Endpoint, actually, and the entire Defender suite.
Okay.
The Defender for Office 365 does not rely on Intune. So, it could be the case that you can implement one of the four applications relatively easily, and then there may be some further, implementation that needs to take place to enable the other three.
Excellent. Oh, thank you for that. Does Defender, as it comes out of the box, does it include any reporting functions, or is that something that Vortex provides analysis, insights, and maybe recommendations on how to interpret?
So the reporting is not all the way there. So I suppose it would be what type of report you're looking for. There are some reporting features out of the box, but I don't know necessarily if they're the reports that a person would be looking for. So like understanding your secure score. For example, a company could have a secure score of like 75 and still be very secure. It just depends on what functionalities you have to function as a business, right? And so I don't know that there's any perfect answer for that. Vortex is happy to discuss secure scores and things like that with our clients. It is something that we actively manage and maintain for all of our clients. And as a Microsoft Direct partner, we have access to what's called the Microsoft 365 Lighthouse, and it allows us to see all of our end users in one pane of glass. So it's something that we get to do and manage from our partner pane of glass, and we can see that for all of our customers.
Okay, and dovetailing that question is this is from me directly, Matt. Is there obviously the security scores that you showed during the demo as well as just referenced here, those are specific to what is Microsoft has defined as the basis or standard for security. Are there other, in other words, how does that compare to maybe other security score systems that are out there in the market? Are they all pretty much aligned as far as what, like a 48 is great or a 39 is not so good? Are they all aligned?
I don't know that they're necessarily aligned. I think a lot of different, main, I don't know, software providers can provide something like this, right? But the reason that we love it is because all of our users get Microsoft Business Premium, and with that Business Premium license, they have access to portions of Defender that we believe are like, should be baseline for all companies. So that's why we go with this version. Is we don't have to pay anything extra to have access to all of these sweet features because it's the license that we're already providing.
Okay, great. No, thank you. And then the last question I have here, let me check the queue again real quick, is, let's see where to go. Here we go. Does Vortex provide any outside training to clients that have already installed MS Defender 365 for business? In other words, and if so, how does that work?
Yeah, a lot of all of our customers come to us for what we call our VCIO program, which is where we make best practice recommendations. But we have done uh, engagements where we'll work with organizations to kind of do a little bit of discovery on what they've got going on and then make recommendations. And we could even teach them how to, remediate those recommendations. So the short answer to that is yes, we're happy to do it.
That's great. Okay, and that pretty much wraps up all the questions from the audience. So again, thank you everyone for participating today. And it looks like everybody pretty much stayed till the very end. And we also had several people visit the website and download some related papers from the Learn section of the website too. So if you haven't done so already, make sure to check out the Learn section of the vortexmsp.com website, where you'll find all different types of educational content and video, written and or spoken video format. So again, as mentioned earlier in the show, we'll be sending you a post-webinar landing page email tomorrow sometime. It'll have a link where you can access the slides in PDF format. Also watch the recorded webinar as mentioned earlier, and take a quick survey. I think it's just 3 quick questions, takes about 30 seconds to provide Matt with some feedback, how he did, how we might be able to improve moving forward. And of course, if you have any other ideas for topics that you might be interested in, so we can tailor our program around it. So the next webinar we have scheduled quarterly right now is sometime late September, early October. So again, we don't have the topic figured out. So if you've got ideas, feel free to send them over. Otherwise, we're going to dig into the coffers and find out what the market needs most and tailor it around that in our expertise. So again, Matt, great job on the webinar today. Thank you so much for everything. And we'll see you on a webinar later this quarter. Take care.